Welcome to Professor Game Podcast, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who brings the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I teach and work at IE Business School in Madrid, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Want to know more? Go to professorgame.com/subscribe, start on our email list, and ask me anything. So engagers, we are back with this panel discussion. I know you were left for a whole week wondering, what about flow? What do the conferences experts think about flow and how it integrates into game-based learning, gamification, and so on? So the wait is absolutely over. I'd like to remind you that we are here in this episode showing a live panel. If you haven't heard the previous episode, I would request you to hit pause, go to the previous episode, and hear the beginning of the panel discussion that we held in the Business Learning Games Conference in Lisbon. So again, we had Teresa de la Era, so Teresa. We had Sarah de Freitas. We had Lars Hoffman. We had Michael Sutton, and we had Paul O'Connor. And again, if you want to listen or you want to read actually from them and about them, who they are, why they're relevant in this world of game-based learning and gamification, please go to professorgame.com, type business learning games, and you will find the link to the show notes in this panel discussion, and you will see all the information that you're looking for there. So again, continue listening to this episode, satisfy that curiosity that was left behind with the previous episode, and enjoy.
I do have a follow-up to this because we're talking about flow, which I think is a very interesting topic, and it's very inspirational for game-based learning, gamification, and all these things. My question is, do you feel flow is in and of itself an objective in using game-based learning, gamification, and these strategies?
In some cases, definitely. It's built in.
In some cases, okay.
Because if you look at a lot of the game design models, they do utilise that concept really deeply in terms of how game design is done, and it's something that we've used in our models, and I'm sure there's many game designers here who use it very centrally. So I think that there's a real understanding about that. I think also in films you see it, you see it in TV, Game of Thrones and Peaky Blinders I talked about the other day. You do get lost in those environments, and it is very much that is flow. You use your sense of time and so on.
But the concept of flow is a tension between anxiety and boredom. Okay, you cannot sustain flow artificially for long periods of time. And as a result, even though many game designers attempt to create an immersive environment that will help trigger flow, if we look at the addictive side of the edutainment area for the younger folks, one of the problems we run into is addiction is semi-permanent. Flow is not. So what I'm feeling is that you're hoping that there is a way we can maintain flow for longer periods of time. I don't think we've got enough science at this stage to be able to do that, because as Fausto mentioned, there is this drive and motivation now for experience. If you're on a river rafting and you get into the rhythm and you get into the flow, sooner or later you're going to be on shore, okay? Because you lose yourself in it, as addicts lose themselves in whatever they're playing. So if experiences are beginning to become peak goals for many individuals, the experiences will create an environment for stimulate flow, but the individuals themselves will not be able to sustain it for long periods, because it would be like being on adrenaline constantly. You can't. You burn yourself out. So I would back this up a bit in saying, why do we want flow to be part of experiences? I don't know. And that's what scares me at this stage, is we do have the addictive millennial generation and those younger. And yet we now understand how flow is this tension, but we haven't understood how you sustain that attention and why you want to. The only thing that would come to mind to me is a more esoteric goal. If you think in terms of the Eastern traditions of meditation and contemplation, that is flow, sustained for very long periods. But the goal is spiritual enlightenment. So if we apply this to workplaces or educational institutions, we have a whole different set of goals that don't match what traditionally took place with flow around those practices. So that's what would worry me.
Okay, any addition or distraction?
I want to remark two things. One is when we are talking about addiction, what research shows is that individuals that get addicted to digital games or games in general is because they already have a psychological problem, right? Or they are needing something that is not being covered by other individuals. So they are feeling too lonely or they have deficit in something. So we should not be talking about addiction as something that we are aiming for within this. And something that is also really important is that play engage us usually because it's something that we choose, that is free. So even for the ones who are game players and the ones who play games every day, it's not each individual game that we are going to be really engaged with. I enjoy playing some games and I hate other games. So it's quite difficult to design a game for educational purposes that is going to be catering for all these individual preferences and needs. And also, if it does not cater to all individual preferences and needs, at some point you are going to say you have to play this game because it's part of our learning process. Then it's not free play anymore. There's no choice, there's no agency. So we are starting from not at that good position already. So this is I think it's one of the challenges. It's not that we cannot overcome that challenge, but it's there and it's something that we should acknowledge, I think.
There's a tension there as well.
Yeah, there's tension, yeah.
Paul?
The other thing about flow is that flow in itself is simply an experiential state. You have got to have periods of reflection in order to synthesize and embed the learning that you've experienced. Otherwise, it's just transient, it's just gone.
Mm-hmm.
So, for learning, the reflective period is incredibly important. You know, it's what we're doing here after the conference, effectively. We're reflecting on what we've talked about and done over the last few days. Because if we don't do that, we walk out of here and there's no memory of what's happened.
Well, that's because of the libations afterwards.
That's a whole other story.
Just on this point.
Yes, please.
You have assumed, of course, that you can't achieve enlightenment in the workplace.
Okay.
No, I haven't assumed it, I just haven't.
This time yet.
Questions regarding this or other topics? I know you had a question, but is there somebody else? Yes, Eric.
Going back to this point of the universities disappearing, or 60% of them, or not disappearing, but actually changing, the proposal to the reform of education is pretty old, from the 50s and 60s. But one of the pillars of education, especially K-12, it's alright, when you were showing for example, your paradigms of education, the new and the old, I wanted to ask, but of course, time. But here's the question. I didn't see testing and exams in there, but you did mention that, say, for example, data collection through the learning management system is present. So, but anyway, going back to the K-12 and all of these pillars of education, exams is one of them. And one of the problems I see is that games do amazing things, but the system does not allow them to replace exams. So, you have your class, you need some goal to deliver, people need to sit at math or geography for X amount of hours, the teacher, the institution may or may not choose to use games and whatever, but in the end they still have to do the same exam. And this is institutionalized and is run by the government law, so try to change this is very difficult. So the question then again is to get rid of this pillar, to get rid of the exams as they are, as they have been designed since the 50s and little has changed. How can we use this learning management system, which we know games are very good at collecting this data. They collect data from the moment we log in until the moment that we stop playing the game. So how do we get this to replace exams?
I would make a small reframe of whether is that what's desirable, is it possible, etc. But it's a great question. Like, how do we do it if that's possible, and if not possible, why not, or etc. Just so that we can have different perspectives as well. Yeah, Sarah, of course.
I think this is a really big piece of work because if anyone who works in universities or schools, knows that a lot of the problem actually is the academics themselves, and they're wedded to the exams, and it's actually really quite hard to get them to think differently. So I think part of it is about having a conversation with educators that's really based in the evidence and that looks at if those sorts of assessments are not realistic assessments, is there pedagogic value there? So my argument is we need different types of assessments, and what I quite like about games is the fact that you can play a game and you can level up, and you don't have to have an exam. You basically get to the end of that level and you've actually gained those skills and you've understood those things. So whether that's in a role play situation or scenarios or combinations of that. And I think that's a really much more powerful approach to assessment than anything that I've seen so far. And I think that there are some exceptions. I think portfolio-based assessment can be very powerful as well. And we shouldn't say, we're going to throw out all the assessments. I think there's got to be a range. And I genuinely believe that we need to look at the way that we assess in games and really start to transfer that into education as soon as possible. And to do that, we have to have a conversation with the community because they're not just going to sort of go from that to that. I think we have to start showing what the arguments are, showing the ethical, showing the evidence base, and really thinking through how we're going to do this. But I think there are some really significant changes as we've talked about today that we need to do in order to get to that place. And I think we still need a lot more investment to go into serious games and educational games, because I think until we start having much more investment going in, it is going to be difficult to show the real power of what we can do.
And that performance-based testing system is much more inclusive of different learning styles, because the current exam-based system only rewards a certain demographic of learners who are very good at content accumulation and repetition.
Mm-hmm. And it's short-term memory. It's almost like the worst of education.
I think you're going to get a huge amount of support from the commercial world here, because the traditional industrial revolution or post-industrial revolution learning is sit still, don't talk to anybody else. We're going to fill your head full of facts that you can Google, okay? And then we're going to test you on them, which no one in commerce has ever asked for. Commerce wants collaboration. It wants people to think out of the box. It wants people to be able to research in an agile, effective way. And it wants results that combine the use of multiple brains and multiple perspectives to create that improvement cycle, such that you come up with a great answer. And I think there is, certainly in the United States, there is a huge backlash happening as we speak, and you can tell me whether this is true. I mean, it's starting, I feel it's starting to happen a bit in the UK, of the commercial world sort of backlashing against the tertiary education system, saying you're producing people that aren't fit for the workplace anymore. And so I don't think actually going back to Michael's point, if the paymasters of the tertiary education are somewhat part of one of the big stakeholders is industry, then I think it's about changing that conversation, because in actual fact that will flow through into the adaptation of learning.
But I think we've had
do you have a question? Did you have a question? No?
I think we've had real challenges in higher education and across the education system, because we didn't know, what are we trying to produce? You know, and I think in the past there's a really clear idea about, you know, we're going to produce lawyers, we're going to produce doctors. Now we're in a state where, you know, we need to produce, you know, lots and lots of data scientists, and we don't really understand how to do that. So, you know, from the educational point of view, you know, we need you, industry, and other, you know, areas to support us. And I think that's why the, you know, degree apprenticeships in the UK, and I'm sure they've got similar approaches in Germany and other countries as well, are so important, because you evolve that shape with industry, and the individual student has that chance to be working in industry. So you know, it's quite, you know, you can see the direction that we can go in there. But I think that there's some huge challenges for education in terms of what do we want to produce, because we still, you know, I think we're beginning to get a clearer idea about what we're trying to produce, but it, you know, it is different from what we've been producing traditionally. So I think it is, you know, a really major step that we need to take, and I think the assessment piece is a really important part of that.
And I think education also resists this idea of producing just for industry. So I think it wants a broader aim of people that are healthy, happy, knowledgeable about many different things, and so that they can do something, their first career, then following career. So I think there's also a resistance in that sense.
And the purists.
If we want to be a little bit provocative, I would say that...
Is it a follow-up question to this topic? Because there's also questions in the back, so I want to make sure. Yeah? You had a question?
Sorry.
Yes.
Just wanted to ask, is it because what is the future skill sets of what's needed in the work environment now is more caught rather than taught? So we think about things like agility, mindfulness, things like this. It's kind of, you have to catch it rather than being taught. So is it the reason why now the educational institutions are struggling to teach it because they're using a taught type of methodology as opposed to a caught type of methodology? I'm not saying just game-based learning as per se. So I mean, how do you teach methodology, as in like in slides, you know, in some things like agility where you've got to experience it? So is that mainly one of the reasons why education institutions are struggling to teach the new skill sets? And as much as you can see a lot of collaborative, you know, industry collaborations, and the industries tell universities what they want, but universities are still unable to do it. So is it necessarily a methodology problem, or is it beyond that?
I think we're working really closely. I mean, most universities, I don't know, you know, I've worked in you know, this is my 6th university actually, I've worked in a lot of universities, and we work really closely with industry to develop the courses that we produce. And I think with the apprenticeship model, even more that is the case. And you know, most courses you'll have an industry, you know, board that will work with you. So you know, we're definitely moving in the right direction, but you know, there's always more that we can do, and we do need to transform some of these key elements which are holding us back.
So what I'm getting as well from Andrew, right? The question is whether, as well, I mean that makes a lot of sense, but is there a methodology problem, and is that the methodology in and of itself one of the barriers that is encountered for, you know, that kind of, because your experience seems to be on the opposite direction, that there is a lot of collaboration already happening, but I'm not sure if that's the case in every other institution as well. Do you have any other views as well on this? The methodology again of experiencing versus lecturing, which I guess is a core of the question, if I'm correct.
Just agreement.
Well, people speak of 21st century skills, and you had it also in your model, and those skills are, you know, typical ones we need in the future: communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking. And these are skills that are very hard to teach. They have to be caught. You need to create an openness to receive it and learn it. It's very hard to deliver it from the stage, right? So I think as a lot of content is becoming available online, we have to say, okay, that's out there, it's handled there, and the universities and the businesses need to teach those higher skills, right? And that requires new learning methods. So definitely, I think that's an easy one.
It's like, I guess it's like teaching public speaking without speaking. It's kind of...
Yeah, you have to do it.
Difficult to say somehow.
Yeah, experiential and lots of feedback circles, etc.
Okay, that's great. So is there any other questions as well? Yeah? No? Fausto?
And as a follow-up to this.
Okay.
We're seeing more and more education online. There's a lot of new courses you can take about a lot of subjects. Could this mean that universities could go more into an institution that can actually test the skills more than just dump information, because you can get the information in a lot of places. Of course, it's great to have people who have a lot of experience to mediate that knowledge, but maybe something like games can be really useful to test that this whole knowledge that we have access to. Maybe people who are not, they don't have the money to go to university, but they can have the option of going to university and be tested to their knowledge that they got in a lot of other places.
So one of the transformations you're proposing or asking about is whether universities can also turn more into a certifier rather than just a content delivery.
You can use it more as an assessment tool, because the actual knowledge is everywhere, and people can get it in a lot of other places.
Okay, I would add to that as well, if I may, the importance of content curation. Because I've gathered as well from what the panelists are saying, it's not just about having information, it's what information you want to look at and how to make sense of all that information. So please, the floor is yours, Michael.
One of the elements that you're touching upon, which is the reason that I'm seeing many younger folks demanding a higher experiential component, is that those universities generally offering online courses are forced by the structures mentioned, the regulatory structures, to be credentialed under particular regulatory rules and regulations which require exams. Exams are not experiences. And in experiential learning, we have a whole new suite of rubrics and assessment and evaluation tools that can significantly identify learning taking place. However, the accreditation agencies involved in those institutes of higher education are not changing fast enough. Which brings me back to my initial disruptive proposal, which was 60% of these institutions, because the younger folks are demanding experiences, are not going to spend their time in a bloody lecture hall. They've got money. They're going to take the money where they can get the experiences. If it is new, emergent academies that are not accredited, that's where the money is going to flow, because they're going to get those experiences.
If I may say, this is already happening.
Yeah, I was going to say. Can I say, just
please, Gillian.
Some of these experiences that you're talking about have already existed within universities, but over 20 years ago, I worked with a university with a design where they had all the information. It was for law students. They had all the information about the procedure that they needed to do in terms of going and filing their remit notice down at the court and going back and getting the information from the judge. And it was a very specific course that they had to do, but they had all the information, but it was a 90% fail rate because they just really didn't understand that experience and how to work together. Those sorts of courses have already been designed, but I think what's happening is that they've been designed by within universities, but on that sort of niche level. And assessments, there's already assessment games that are designed specifically for particular courses in the academic world. I think that fundamentally, though, that it's really the ubiquitous nature. It's kind of like when Lars was talking this morning about these specific games that he's the custom design games that you're doing for very niche areas. But fundamentally, it's great to have a custom design game. But fundamentally, it's like, well, how do you do it so it's facilitating a huge number of people, and how do you make it simple enough so that you can, make it so an organisation can customise it easily? Because these things are not cheap to produce, as we know.
That brings me to a follow-up question as well about the customization versus mass production, and it's whether it's very related. Sorry, just let me finish the idea, so that of course you can provide your insights. And it's about the broadness of publics that you might have for a game, and how, for whether different generations or interests or whatever it may be, how does that impact the way that we are creating these learning games? And what is perhaps even, where do you think this should be shifting towards? Because you mentioned maybe having a broader audience. It should be a broader audience with diverse interests, or maybe more focused, smaller focused audiences where you're targeting. So I'd like to hear your insights precisely related to what you were mentioning before. When I say any and all of yours.
Can I just respond to the last question? I think what the situation you described about accessing information and learning is already happening. So MIT has put up all of their courses online.
Yeah.
You can train yourself in anything. The business model is you pay them to be certified. Okay?
Exactly.
So that's so in terms of the business model emerging, that's emerging. The other thing is that in business itself, the demands of HR are changing. So roles are being specified, and what's happening is there are students who, rather than going to an academic institution, are self-learning at the same time as taking internships. So they're becoming the self-apprenticed almost. And they are coming through an experience of working in Google or Facebook or whatever, where they're accrediting themselves to these modules of learning, and they're coming out with 3 years work experience at the same. So when they go to the next job, they're not like some student coming straight out of college who's just got a degree and not a clue how the business place works. They're actually coming out with life skills that they can take into the workplace that makes them more relevant to the workplace. And this is where business needs are going to start affecting how we learn.
Can I just give the example of the university where I work at the moment? Actually, it's a year 1 year abroad, so it's a placement year for all of our students. So about 75% of our students already have a year in industry before they actually complete their degrees. And I think that's actually a really powerful model, and I think it's one that we will see more. I think with the apprenticeships as well, I think there's huge capability for how we can replicate these sorts of models as we go forward, whether that's something that people do themselves or whether that's done centrally through the university system.
Sure.
I think also the point about micro-credentialing, I think that's also an opportunity as well as a threat potentially. But it does allow you to move around more, so you could then get credit from industry experience or from academic courses and so on, and build your own degree or build your own courses.
And would it also tie up with I think more and more people. So we went to the phase where if we take a course, a university course, we have a better job. Then we went through doesn't matter. I'm not going to get the job anyway, so it doesn't seem to matter. And we might go, and I think it's a good idea university courses is a way of self-improvement. And that means that maybe I shouldn't take in Portugal I took a 5-year course, which is just like the most basic one was 5 years. 5 years is a lot of time. Yeah. And I might have wanted to choose better what those 5 years, what I was learning to cater to a certain goal that I had. And so doing that micro-assessment would be me catering myself, like how it's going to be my learning, and if it adapts to what I exactly want to do.
But if we think about the sort of future of learning, maybe think 20, 30 years forward, I think if we accelerate, if we can accelerate learning on the level that we think we can, people will be going to university much earlier, so maybe you might be seeing people go to university at 12. I think it's going to be quite a different model in the future. I do think accelerated learning is going to give us some serious changes to what we see today, and I think there'll be benefits to that as well as challenges.
Great. Is there any further questions that you want to have? Yeah, please.
Just shifting a little bit the topic. I find that most of the time, at least a lot of the time, we talk about educational games or serious games, about how to design them or how to use them in education and how to research them. We don't include the learners, so we don't involve them in this process. Or even teachers, at least in I know you were talking mostly about university, but at least in K-12 stages, which makes it way harder to then use them in schools. Maybe I'm wrong, but at least that's my perception here in Portugal. What do you think today is being done well in this area, and what should we be doing better to fill this gap? Or at least if you don't feel that there's a gap.
I'm guessing not just in Portugal, but in the experience of our panelists as well, which I think is a fantastic question. Like, what are the gaps between what we're observing and what you would probably wish for having? Is that right?
in North America, and I would include Canada there, the whole curriculum in K through 12 is driven by core curriculum that has been developed around exams and tests. And you can't get a charter unless you do that, which means to change the bureaucracies at the state or provincial level to put that on its head will take decades, because there's all kinds of vested interest now in maintaining core curriculum, because the industrial model is still to turn out people in high school with all the same learning. It's very much that Prussian model that we started with back in the 1800s. Line them up in rows, turn them out so that they can work in the factories. Well, we're going to have a hard time changing that, which means when they come to one of my classes, for example, as an undergraduate, and I start using games, I have the same issue that Diane had with the Koreans. It's kind of like, talk to me, lecture me, give me tests. I don't want to play games. They've spent K through 12 not doing that. And there does not appear to be a significant change in North America. I know in Finland and a number of Scandinavian countries, that is dramatically changing. So I can't see how we can appeal to them within a traditional structure to continue when actually the demand, because of the programming that's gone on by those individuals in K through 12, force them to want to ask for lectures and tests.
But I'm talking also even in the development of the game, for example.
I want to...
Yes, please.
Because my experience is completely different. I think I had the opportunity to teach in Spain, which has a quite traditional approach to teaching. It's changing, of course, but it's quite traditional still. And now I teach in the Netherlands, which is completely the opposite, right? We have in our university an innovation lab for education, and each faculty has an innovation hub. And basically we are receiving funding as teachers if we have ideas in how to innovate for our courses. So we get money to implement ideas in our courses, and we also have the possibility to get research assistants. So many of us are hiring students in order to get their input on how we should approach the courses in order to engage better with students. This Center for Innovation really encourage us to use technologies in class in order to interact with our students. But I've been experiencing this in different perspectives, and I've seen teachers like using the technology in different ways. And using the technology because they want to use the technology without having a specific goal. And what I've experienced is, in many cases, for example, I'm going to create an interactive video and then students can watch and interact with it before the lecture. They still do not have the motivation for that. They did still not engage in the course. And we experience that they do not interact with the video because we can see the numbers. While when we use that video in class and then after them individually interacting with the video can engage in a conversation with other students and then share their opinions and ideas, the results are completely different. So I think what we offer as university nowadays is we provide all the material, and then here you come to have the interaction and the conversation and the debates with other students. That is something that you cannot have alone at home, and this is what we offer as university. And it's not mandatory for us to use exams, but personally, when I use exams, I do not use them to test if they have memorized the content, more also to test if they understood the content. So questions are phrased in order for them to show they are able to establish links between concepts and then show how they could be applied in real life. So I think even if we have to use exams, it's the way we design the exams that makes a difference.
and how difficult it is as well to grade them, and where that balance between the load that you have as a professor and how much you can achieve and you can do in that time. Any more inputs? I think this is our last question. Do you have any more inputs before we close up? Well, thank you very much to all of you, the panelists. Thank you for a fantastic audience as well with the great intervention. Thanks, John, and the Business Excellence Institute for getting this together. So,
thank you very much.
Hey, Engagers, thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast. And if you want more episodes like this one, with incredible guests, live recordings, then go to professorgame.com/subscribe and get started into our email list. There, receive that first email, let me know that you're liking this interview, or if you're already subscribed, just hit reply to any of the emails I've sent you before and let me know. I'd like to know how you are enjoying, how much you're enjoying, or maybe even not enjoying these episodes. And before you go into your next mission, would you like to know what we have prepared as an anniversary episode? Because yes, the next episode is our anniversary. Well, if you want to find out, then you have to subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.